Oh, that's where they come from. Hey, everybody. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. Put your ugly sweater armor back on, load up your candy cane cannon, grab a hot cup of something. Phoenix Point, created by Snapshot Games, is a turn-based strategy game for PC in 2019 and consoles in 2021. Set in a near-future post-apocalypse, you command a shadowy organization tasked with protecting the Earth. This premise will feel familiar to Tactics fans because the lead designer is Julian Gollop, creator of the original XCOM series. Mr. Gollop founded the company Snapshot Games in 2013 and used his expertise to get back into the same strategy universe that he played such a large part in forming. Phoenix Point is considered the spiritual successor of the 1990s XCOM. After a fairly successful crowdfunding campaign through the website fig.co, which I was totally there day one, you guys. I'm so cool. The game was eventually released early on the Epic Games Store, the usual year ahead. This did cause some ill will, as using Epic was never discussed until the end of the campaign. Also, some expectations during the crowdfunding never made it on release, furthering a more general dislike. In my opinion, some of this dislike is valid and most not. I'm also wanting to show a lot of the negativity of the game early on in the review, because that was kind of the mood of the release. A lot of people were upset. Let's take a quick look at some of these. Nice try. Horrible menu icons and fonts, narrative almost absent, other people complain about bugs and crashes, however I did not encounter any major bugs. Uninstalled, 1.5 hours. Snapshot delivered a good game. It builds on UFO XCOM mechanics in a fun way and adds its own twist on top of that. I do like the difficulty players have to adapt. It's a race to win. This guy gets it. I'm pretty easy to please as a consumer, but this is like right where I'm at. Interesting at first, it gets boring on the long way. Diplomacy is so flat it makes me cry. They should rather remove it than make it this awful. And okay, diplomacy early game was pretty lackluster, but they've gone a long way with it. I mean, there's still ways it could go, but yeah, where it's at now is completely different. Anyway, back to it. Not that there weren't bugs and mislabeled text. It just helps to have some context. From what I could find, the move to Epic was entirely based on monetary issues.
This deal is a real game changer for our studio because, thanks to Epic's support, it is certain that we will be able to update and expand Phoenix Point for years to come.
Probably an eyes bigger than your stomach situation, especially for a small developer. Epic is really good at putting that money up front for that sweet, sweet year of exclusivity. Sort of a catch-22, hurt your immediate sales and get more money to complete your vision. I can't really fault them for money woes. Also, they did make good to original backers by giving a full second copy of the game with all future DLC on the platform of their choice after the year of Epic. So why did Mr. Gollop decide to come back and into modern strategy? I like to think that he played the modern Firaxis XCOM and it got him so mad that he had to make a new XCOM like out of pure spite. Small tangent, it's like how we got the film Troll 2.
Oh my god!
In the documentary of that movie, we learned that the screenwriter came up with the story due to her friends becoming vegetarian, and it, quote, pissed me off.
I won't allow it!
And I'm not trying to compare Phoenix Point to the lovable schlock that is Troll 2, but however things went down, strategy fans went out. In actuality, according to the 2017 EGX interview, he saw the success of the Firaxis XCOM and it revitalized him, realizing that there was a market for strategy.
The amazing thing that happened here, and it's really quite remarkable, is this very old turn-based game system was revived and rebooted amazingly successfully after many years of struggle by Firaxis and Jake. And it basically proved to me that this genre was not actually dead at all, that there was still a substantial audience for it, which, from my point of view, is absolutely fantastic.
That's what was said publicly, but me and you, we know it's totally a Troll 2 situation, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's gotta be, what else could... In Phoenix Point, you play the faction known as the Phoenix Project. You learn that this organization has been around since 1945 and has done its best to have its thumb in the plum of global concerns. As time passes, the Phoenix Project goes more and more into the shadows. Eventually, Earth finds itself subject to rapid climate change because humans got a human. These events melt the ice caps, releasing a long-buried viral strain known as the Pandora virus. Seemingly alien in nature, the virus spreads rapidly, affecting all biological life forms, causing severe mutations to some. Humans feel compelled to take a dip in the ocean after sniffing some strange mist emanating from the sea, never to be seen again. The majority of human population was lost during this event, and I assume some dogs and cats too. The year is now 2047. The planet is undergoing radical changes. The third instance or wave of mist approaches from the sea, and you start with a skeleton crew. Beset by Lovecraftian monstrosities every step of the way, you are tasked with reforming and reclaiming what little remains of humanity, figuring out what happened to the Phoenix Project and Earth, and ultimately deciding the direction humanity will go. But it's not all laughs, as you can only dilly about for so long, as there is a soft timer. Lose too much of the global population, and it's game over. And if you toss into the pot my more often than not glaring incompetence when it comes to tactical thinking, then this is gonna be one tasty nightmare soup.
We are going to die!
What do you even do against such pessimistic atmosphere? How does a typical game of Phoenix Point go? You got base building, you got positioning, you got grenades and guns, you got all the things a boy could need to eke by just one more day, but how do things interact, and more importantly, what does Phoenix Point add to the robust strategy genre? I don't really want to spend a whole lot of time comparing Firaxis XCOM with Phoenix Point. I still kind of want to, and I have a point to make. It's going to take me some time to get to that point with how my brain works, so bear with me. Firaxis XCOM took the original XCOM's absolutely need to look at the manual to just start playing, for the love of God, what do half these buttons even do mechanics, boiled them down to a more arcadey style gameplay, foregoing long-term tactical choices and focusing more on moment-to-moment combat puzzles, like the enemy group mechanic called pods and max turns. When you move in modern XCOM, you can move and then you can shoot, or you can move twice, or you can just shoot. It's basic, and then they add skills on top to add complexity. Part of the combat puzzles is working within said limitation of movement. Phoenix Point also boils down and modernizes the original's mechanics, but with a much greater emphasis on long-term choices and a more free-form combat. Gone are enemy pods, combat puzzles, and turn limits. You have full control of your movement through action points. Your basic abilities like moving and shooting cost action points, which feel like an updated version of the time unit mechanic of the original XCOM, if you are familiar with that system. A lot of combat can equate to managing you and your enemy's action points, and there are hundreds of ways to do so. This is one of the main reasons I enjoy this game. Once that concept starts to truly click, you start understanding how you can really mess up a crabman's day. But I'll come back to that later. So what do I mean by greater emphasis on long-term choices? In modern XCOM, when looking at the geoscape or the little holographic lit up Earth, in both games you have lots of choices of things you can do, but you don't have time to do them all. The difference is, modern XCOM points out which missions are important and puts timers on just about every option. The reason you can't do everything is typically there is a timer on it, but the more important stuff is still very generous with said timer. Modern XCOM doesn't really penalize you for trying to do everything. Phoenix Point absolutely does. In Phoenix Point, you have to triage. You need to make the call where to send your good time gang, and if you make the wrong call, you could be spread out too thin and may get attacked on the other side of the globe, and those bad calls can eventually cause a slow and painful death. This triage doesn't end with just where to send people for your next battle. It also matters when researching. It matters in how you use your resources. You can easily find yourself on the defensive and reacting to Pandoran movement for long periods of time, and then realizing you are not making any headway toward furthering your own goals. This specific scenario happens to me so many times before I even realize what I'm doing. The game does a fantastic job of putting your back against a wall. It is a mood. To that end, there are what I consider red herrings or pitfalls that can waste your time and resources. These are definitely not things you'll notice on a first time playthrough. I want to reiterate that Phoenix Point is absolutely a mood. I don't always want to dive in, but when my head is in that zone, oh baby does it probe my meat. I apologize everyone, it was uncalled for. There are tons of mechanics that I won't go super in depth on that I'm sure others have in good detail, but I'll give a quick rundown of some. There is a free aim mechanic that's pretty spiff. If you got a shotgun up on some beastie's chest bits, it's gonna give them the business. There's mutation, there's cross-classing, there's augmentations, vehicles, there's fire that's real smoky, there's mist that's real smoky, and a big dog called Nana. How does this all play out though? You try and make good with the remnants of humanity if you want to. Doing so has some amazing benefits, but you don't have to. Of the remnants, there are three major factions at play: Sanhedrin, New Jericho, and Disciples of Anu. When left to their own devices, they consistently hate each other's guts.
We therefore declare war.
These factions represent a number of things that you can decide who among this love triangle, quadrangle, you want to give your red rose to. That being said, I have seen pictures of people allying with all three factions, making me question if I am playing this right. I would expect a Stardew Valley-esque event to happen, so you better hold on to your rabbit's foot. Sanhedrin has freaking lasers. I would consider them to be the most advanced of all the factions, including the Phoenix Project. When I play, I typically ally with these guys because I'm a sucker for anything futuristic. They're kind of the Star Trek faction, with roots in anarchism, communism, socialism, basically everything but capitalism. Democratic in how they present themselves and ran by all citizens. Everyone has a voice, that sort of thing.
Trying to build a truly democratic society without hierarchies involves a lot of arguing.
Their havens are very clean and described as domed. Their goals are typically guided by finding a livable balance with humanity and the world they now find themselves in. They use poison and paralysis mechanics unique to their weaponry. They use poison and paralysis mechanics unique to their weaponry, along with stealth. They have access to the Infiltrator class, which can be nasty damage dealers if unnoticed. They are basically the Hidden Ninja Village faction. They also have the most tech when it comes to resources you can obtain. I like to think of these three factions as some kind of like time concept representation, and I'd say that these guys closely represent the future of humanity, if that makes sense. And then you have New Jericho, I would say represent the present the best. They are equal to or less advanced than the Phoenix Project. Their weapons include fire and piercing, along with high armor values on their armor. Their havens are a more current, if a little futuristic look to them, complete with walls.
At best, it's a way of distracting from failures of the will. At worst, it's outright treason against our species.
Yeah, I typically don't play with these guys. Very fascist and authoritarian. They do whatever their leader Tobias Swift says, following his plan and casting aside those who don't follow his ideals of what being human is. In other words, they follow the if you're not with them, you're against them mentality just slightly more than the others. These guys are stuck trying to cling to life before the Pandora virus and the most resistant to reading the global room. They do have access to some of the best technology in the game and the amazing technician class, a support class with Doc Ock arms. Thankfully, Like real life, you can always steal something someone else has. This does piss off whatever faction you're stealing from, but nothing time and a few good deeds won't fix. Of the game's resources, New Jericho has the most materials of the factions, which makes Tobias West a material girl. The Disciples of Anu are probably the most interesting faction. If there is anything like magic in this world, Anu has it. It may be a more Lovecraftian horror magic, but hey, magic's magic. The least advanced in the traditional sense, I would say, of these three factions, these guys represent the past. Their havens are typically shown as two different styles. You have clean, religious areas, and then you have shanty towns complete with outdoor computers. Anu weapons include lots of melee options, including hammers and swords. They also use acid and viral weapons.
Tobias West may be clever and Synedrian may sound great, but only the Exalted is dealing with the world as it actually is.
With exception to the most extreme cases, they're incredibly inclusive, having some, if not the largest populations per haven. Choosing to adapt to and adopt the current global crisis as the next step of human evolution, they follow an extremely mutated human called the Exalted and worship the dead god.
Let the judgment of the dead god fall upon them.
Yes, this really is Shadow over Innsmouth tactics, more so than you realize. They have access to two unique classes, the Berserker, a close-range focus class, and the Priest, another support class specializing in debuffing and all sorts of shenanigans. Anu's primary resource is food. Finally, there's the Phoenix Project, fairly advanced scientifically and quick to learn from all the factions.
I've heard a lot about you people. Most of it weird. Science nerds with guns, huh? Well, I've heard worse ideas.
They are small in number, but they got that pluckiness, you know? Just makes you want to keep trying. As the player faction, they behave like sentient tofu, taking on whatever technological and ideological flavor the player chooses to ally themselves with. Each faction has its own tech tree that is just as robust as the players, and some faction tech can be mixed with Phoenix tech, causing some really interesting combinations. The ending of the game involves mixing Phoenix and ally techs, but you still have the choice to not ally at all and go it alone. This leads to a nuke it from orbit style war crime ending, but the option is there. You use all the three main resources of tech, materials, and food, and obtain them by trading, helping, stealing, scavenging, scrapping, farming, however you can get your paws on them, it's to your benefit. Also, all other havens share their tech with you if you're friends, but you don't share your tech with them. The friendship feels a little one-sided. On a side note, take a look at this tech tree. I pulled this off the wiki. And don't get me wrong, it is readable, and I kind of get where it's going, but wow, it got me cross-eyed. It doesn't feel this complicated in game, but as someone who played multiple times, this diagram is incredibly confusing for me. This could just be how my brain works, and I'm very likely overcomplicating this as well as most things in my life. Now to talk about the giant enemy crab in the room. The Pandorans are the shrouded enemy faction that you can't ally with as much as I'd want to. Where my modders at? Anywho, these are the real threat in the game, even though you can spend some quality time fighting off humans for their green apples. Pandorans come in all shapes and sizes. Shapeses? Pandorans come in all shapes and sizes, from splody worms to splody bugs to crabs with crabs inside to unearthed dug trios to buildings with legs. They even have their own tech tree, which you find out what they got after they research it in a report from the field style communication. This is your best way of knowing what could be coming and if you are prepared for it. Killing Pandorans gives you research for their corpse. Generally, this amounts to letting you do more damage and unlocking further tech based on their abilities. Like, doing the autopsy on this thing with the shield will net you shotgun research. Killing Mutated the Frog Sniper will give you shield research. Killing the Fireworm? Okay, so they don't exactly line up. Hey, I'm just having a laugh. The design here is tech is linked to help deal with what you just autopsied, which is a much better way of handling tech advancement, but it's fun to think that the minds at the Phoenix Project wouldn't know what a shield is till they see crabs using them. I've seen way too many games do it that way, so it's actually pretty cool to see some thought put into it here. The real fun begins when you build a containment unit and you start getting access to paralysis weaponry. You start off with a so-so melee ranged taser, which can be a bit risky to use. I recommend just being friends with Synedrian for a bit till they share their paralysis pistol tech, or just swipe a couple from their corpses so you can reverse engineer them, or just steal the research. You can apologize later by paying reparations to their nearest damaged haven. The pistols do less paralysis per shot, but they are miles safer than being in melee range with these things. Once you get more confident in what the crabs can do, you'll be fine going in. I don't trust myself to think things through properly, so I like to play it safe. Once you manage to capture a Pandoran, you can further your research by prodding live specimens, but you also get access to Old Bay seasoning tech and can now eat the captured critters. Researching these harvesting techniques prompts a response from Tobias West, where he chastises us with a delicious story.
Are you aware of the legend of Fort Bacon?
He's upset that we want to survive in the current climate and tells us not to give in to the mystery meat. This is, of course, in stark contrast to the mystery meats at a pre-apocalyptic Wendy's or Arby's that he seems to have rose-colored glasses for. Don't worry, Toby, my containment centers are fresh, never frozen.
Don't let them eat, Joshua. For the love of God, don't let them eat.
By the way, if you go onto the Phoenix Point official website, you can actually read the legend of Fort Bacon, along with a lot of flavorful lore-building stories for the universe, including one about living sushi. They aren't always food-based. Outside of eating the enemy, you typically spend your time flying around the map, expanding your sphere of influence. You do this by scanning points of interest. These will typically be havens, multiple choice event prompts, or scavenge missions. Scavenge sites are a great way of getting much needed resources, especially early on, but you do have to deal with consistent enemy spawns that could overwhelm. Your best bet is to hit hard and fast, grab and go. Event points of interest really help world build. This will be like your troops finding some burnt out location, remnants of an old Phoenix warehouse, or a really long pig. In this instance, you can take some time to look at the pig and get a boost of whatever you're researching, like the Disciples of Anu in this case, or you can leave and never bother it again. There is no option to kill it, don't even try, it'll break the immersion. Most events amount to spending something to get something, like spending some time and resources to get more resources, or letting a faction know about it and getting a boost with said faction. Tell Anu about some cool gross thing you found and they will view it as the second coming, but New Jericho will be upset that you didn't just burn it. How did New Jericho even know I was here? I think we have a spy, or the Phoenix Project isn't immune to hot goss. And then there are ambush events. These are rare, but can suck when you aren't prepared for them. Typically around mid-game, I have my A squad responding to some haven attack, and my most green squad expanding the map for me, so it's usually the untested getting thrown in the fire. Ambushes can be rough, but doable. You really just have to survive a few rounds and then book it to an exit. The trick is the exit doesn't appear until those rounds are up, so if you have my luck, it'll be on the other side of the map from where you decided it was best to hunker down. The other action on the planet sans DLC are haven and base defenses. You want these to happen, assuming you win the defense. These will be your best bet to follow the gigantic Pandoran footprints back to where they are coming from and take the fight back to them. You just have to be careful of overextending. If you got one team and they are across the globe protecting some backwoods Anu haven and your main base gets attacked, you're gonna have a bad time. Taking the fight to Pandorans is realistically done in two ways, through main story missions / research and Pandoran colony attacks. Pandoran colonies come in 3 flavors: Nest, Lair, and Citadel. There are others, but I'll get to them in the spoiler section. In each one, you are exploring a Pandoran ocean-themed cave system, finding the big thing, killing the big thing, and then leaving.
That hurt, didn't it?
I would say this section of the game feels the most in need of variety and perhaps my greatest disappointment. Now, to be fair, I am dumbing it down. The layouts between the 3 do change how you'd behave tactically, but each colony type on their own never really changes. Just the enemies and their locations are the main noticeable differences. After going through your 5th one, you just want to burn through it as fast as possible. Also, my disappointment comes in how you attack the colonies, or I guess their location. You send your plane over to the location and send your guys in. The problem is, up until this point, everything in their mother is telling you that these things come from the sea. Sure, the caves are ocean themed, but all the colonies are on dry land. There are no underwater missions. I understand that this would add another huge layer to an already established set of systems, and I'm not exactly asking for terror from the deep. This was something that was planned, but did not reach its funding goal. Without it though, it's like we are never truly taking the fight to the Pandorans just through small land-based finger colonies. If there is a reason for them to only be making footholds on land and we need to wipe that out, that could work. But have us do some oceanology tech or explorations to understand that. As it stands, it just feels like we're just ignoring the ocean entirely when it's such a huge part of the threat. Alternatively, one of the things I really enjoy about the game is the combat. This is going to sound obvious, but when you deal with one problem, you're dealing with the overall issue. Just like on the global map, you still need to triage here, and you have lots of options. Do I deal with the biggest threat on the map, or do I go for disabling the nearest enemy's limbs to free up my troops? Do I ignore it all and rush an objective? Or do I force a panic situation? You are looking at the bigger picture each combat, and what makes it truly work is will points, or really the panic mechanic. Panic is a great system and really makes you think tactically. You can panic, this guy can panic, everyone can panic. One of the first things I think about in combat is what is the best way to get half the map to start pancaking. You and the enemy have will points, which you can see here. Your and enemy special abilities cost will points to use. If you don't have enough will points, you can't use that ability. Simple pimple. Killing someone causes someone else on that team to take a will point hit, depending on what it is that died. You can kill a really big critter on the enemy team, and everyone everywhere on that team, excluding worms for some reason, will take a will point hit of, let's say, -5. If anything goes into negative will points, they immediately panic. This causes them to run in a random direction and try to recover, basically foregoing their turn. This can really turn tables for or against you in some situations. Against if your guys are the ones panicking, obviously. You can recover a percentage of will points a turn, but it takes your whole turn to do so. So not only do you have to keep an eye on everyone's will points, you are thinking of the best way to get rid of the opposing team's will, and there are tons of ways to do that. Killing enemies is the obvious way, but you may want to keep an enemy alive long enough to bleed out on the next turn to basically stack panic. Virus is a debuff you can put on enemies that literally gets rid of X amount of will per turn, making it extremely powerful when dealing with things that have the will of an actual mountain. The priest class can just force panic onto others that have less will than they do by sneezing on them. Ever since the pandemic, this works on me as well. One last thing about panic, and this is just a personal suggestion. Panic is a good system, but could be more. I think it's a bit too controllable for what it represents. You more or less know what you or the enemy are going to do when in panic mode, and I'd like to see this expanded if at all possible within the mechanics. Panic responses in real life are typically 3 things: fight, flight, or freeze. In Phoenix Point, we have flight, and maybe unintentionally we have freeze. I'd like to see a fight response from your units or the enemy. Fight responses could be tossing a grenade randomly or firing in some random direction. Really could be anything. Priests could just start screaming. Make panic a really uncontrollable factor. To aid in this, you could have psych evaluations on your units, and when recruiting, a quick rundown could show what they are most likely to do in a stressful situation. Numbers, of course, could be tweaked, but like 80% chance to do what the evaluation says, and the other 10s being the other responses. Suddenly, you might think twice about picking up a rando with a trait that doesn't jive. This also could add a little character to your units and could be hilarious to watch enemy units panic and kill each other. Speaking of hilarious, I also want to quickly mention fire. You can get fire from New Jericho Tech. They have fire grenades that put down a huge radius of standing fire for what feels like forever. Fire in this game is wonky, and I still haven't figured out exactly how it works. Enemies don't understand how it works either, so I'm on even footing. You seem to be safest in fire if you just stand in it. If you dare to move, your whole body will explode in a bloody mess. It feels like this happens 9 times out of 10, but sometimes it just doesn't do anything. I think it just ticks insane damage with each instance of model collision, but I have no real idea. You can effectively lock down spawn zones with one of these grenades, and anything that comes through is likely too damaged to be a threat and seriously questioning life choices. Why does fire make you bleed anyway? Could add some tactical variety to run in and out of the fire to cure bleed status. That's actually really funny to think about. I need to make a disclaimer before I go any further. You should not take tactical advice from me. After so many years, I find my brain works differently than some, especially when it comes to strategy games like Phoenix Point. Known optimal strategies will get jumbled up in my mind and puke out in the form of a derpy chimera, barely resembling the original strategy. I find I miss a step or add something that breaks it. Where most know when to take calculated risks, I run the risk of making calculated moves. As such, I tend to avoid most information about a game to have a more natural progression. This can still be frustrating as I've got the reading comprehension of a sweet potato. I say all this to share my excitement that even with this hurdle, this game started to really click for me, and it just took a few hours. To get an idea what I'm talking about, I'm going to share one of the many ways to feel like a real tough guy.
It is essential that the information I am about to give you is kept confidential.
The Berserker class. I could end it there. It's an amazing class with some of the best abilities in the game. Specifically, ignore pain. It's really good to cross-class with just for that. But that's not the skill I'm wanting to focus on. Adrenaline Rush is amazing. I slept on this for way too long, being scared of being dazed. Daze basically makes you miss a turn by relegating you to one action point. But you can get a lot done while in Adrenaline Rush mode, even on that one turn. A big thing to keep in mind is it makes all action point abilities only cost one action. This includes Recovering Will, which is normally 4 actions. So whatever you spent, you can get back. That's all well and good, but that daze, what can we do about that? Well, once you get access to the mutation lab, go to your unit's mutate button. The very first head you get gives you immunity to daze. And just like that, your biggest concern is how much ammo you have left. Cross-class that with anything, and I'm sure you can find a use for it. Once you get to the point where the game really clicks, then you have to make a choice. Do you go all in and trivialize a lot of the combat, or do you restrain yourself? This comes down to the type of player you are, and you'll get no judgment from me. There is a satisfaction to be had when going ham, considering up until that point, your back has been constantly against a wall and you are barely scraping by through both resources and technology. The Pandorans can tech up incredibly quickly, and your basic weapons get outclassed before you realize it. Again, sans DLC. What I'm saying is, who's gonna know if you spread a little cheese now and again if it gets you out of a bad situation? You still have to earn that cheese though. Of course, some of these things can get patched out or tweaked over time, but the developers have shown some restraint in doing so. Another cheese combo involved running through an entire map on a single turn, leeching action points with melee kills. So, in the Legacy of the Ancients DLC, they added Umbra enemies that spawn after death, invulnerable until their turn, making you rethink going in melee. In the Festering Skies DLC, they added Myrmidon enemies that explode in either acid or poison upon death, literally making you rethink those strategies. Outside of how annoying these enemies can be, I love these additions. I'd feel neglectful if I didn't mention skills do get changed. The skill Rage Burst got changed substantially, so not all tactics get this treatment. It's very thematic for the Pandorans to evolve counters to playstyles versus the easier out of nerfing abilities. I don't know if they plan to go forward like this, but I really hope so. I do have to stress something about the daze immunity thing, and it's not specifically about the daze head, it's just the readability of some of the augmentations. And this is a huge sticking point for me. I don't really beat myself up for not recognizing that combo sooner, because not all text in the game is clear with its meaning. Look at these legs. What the heck is this stance talk? That's not even a thing, but you're led to believe it is. If this is just represented as the constant accuracy buff, then that's fine, but make it read that way. I side-eyed the whole lineup of augments going forward, and that may just be a me thing. I ended up avoiding mutations as a whole for entirely way too long. Another stressor are the bugs. Now, to be fair, a lot of bugs are fixed from release, and I only ran into a couple in my last full playthrough. The worst of it cost me a unit. I think this may be why there isn't an Iron Man option in the settings. So at least you can always reload, not that that is a great option in every scenario. See, this is Dad. That was my first real cheesy unit I made. He got me through a lot of tough times. The S-ranked member of the A squad. Dad led a mission to rescue a haven. I plopped him over here to take cover. The next turn, he was just gone. I had no idea until the end of the mission when it showed him killed in action. There's his stuff. There's an obvious joke here about Dad, but I had to reload and get him back. I usually accept deaths, but this one was out of my control. Second time through the mission, no issues, and I haven't seen that bug since, but it had me on edge going forward. Also, Haven rescues have you killing this thing. If you get too close to it, it wrecks you. So the best thing to do is to break through the wall with the heck cannon. There is a bionic torso that lets you break through walls, and that's probably better, but I forgot about it till long after. Breaking through walls with the cannon is not something that comes up a lot except for this mission for me, so I never noticed how finicky it can be. You typically can't even shoot through the spots you already opened up, as it seems there is still something in the way. I brought this up on the Discord, and general consensus thought it was this IKEA furniture causing the weird hitbox. Silly me, of course! Lastly, I want to talk about the camera. Most of the game is in an isometric view of your baby scooting around the map. This is the norm for this kind of thing. I think the camera gives me the most frustrations, though. The smaller issue is it's really difficult at times to go to certain elevations to see properly where your guys are going to actually run to. Sometimes their movement ranges just don't show up when changing elevations. That one is rarer, but the bigger issue for me is the camera is sometimes way too fast at moving to the next thing. There will be times that I'll kill a thing on Overwatch and not know it due to the camera zooming away. Or I'll toss a grenade and it breaks a building that one of my units were in and not know how it fared until I scroll back over to it. These are truthfully small annoyances, but they can add up. Now on to DLCs before I go into spoilers. The first edition was originally a backer bonus and technically isn't DLC, but I'll add it here anyway. Living weapons. This adds 2 weapons that are so-so and an armor set that is amazing. It also adds some related missions. You get an acid assault rifle and a poison heavy weapon. The poison one can be useful, but honestly skippable. But that acid one can be real tactically viable, as it's a great way to chew through armor. They both are elevated by the fact that they don't even use ammo, so go to town without worrying about material cost. The armor, on the other hand, is incredible. It's great on any class and is really the best armor in the game. This armor alone makes doing these missions worth it. The true first expansion is Blood and Titanium. This adds the sub-faction, the Pure, a group of robots that were created by Newt Jericho to be immune to the infection entirely. Things go awry, and now Toby wants to bury them under the rug. But like the dust bunnies in my house, they refuse to be ignored. This adds bionics to the game, and with it some extremely powerful augments at a heavy resource cost to both build and maintain. You cannot ally with the Pure even though the events seem to go that direction. Eventually they will attack you.
For the sake of the future, they must be exterminated. Exterminated! Again and again and again.
Sounds like a pretty cool technology, really.
The second DLC, Legacy of the Ancients, adds a whole set of new materials for you to use and new weapons you can create. But probably the most upfront work to even get your hands on them. But wowza, are they worth it? The whole premise is that there's this antediluvian civilization that dealt with the Pandora virus long ago. Now with the world changing, these sites are getting uncovered and everyone wants a piece of that pie, if you know what I mean. Doing the legwork involves building robots to find robots, killing the robots, and sending one of your guys to mine the sites for the rest of their life. Once you get the schemata and have enough materials for the weapons, they realistically replace all your regular weaponry with a more powerful version. And like the living weapons, don't cost any ammo to use. By the time you get your squads loaded up with these weapons, you'll be saving so many resources by not having to buy ammo anymore that this whole process easily pays for itself. The sooner the better, but I usually tend to hold off on these sites until way too late to get that return. Before I get to the next DLC, all 3 of the previous editions were ported over to Steam from Epic in the Year 1 edition. If you have that version, you have all that's been said so far. It really has fleshed out the game at this point, but specifically only for the tactical layer. Outside of the individual points of interest, the geoscape remains largely unchanged. That's where DLC 3, Festering Skies, comes in, and I got a lot of thoughts on this one, so buckle in. Festering Skies turns the methodical, somewhat chill, somewhat stressful geoscape planning and amps that stress level to 37. Suddenly you have this giant red monstrosity called the Behemoth popping up in random locations, sending its sky babies to meet and greet the local havens. You can drive it back by dealing with its offspring in a minigame that starts off as to this is getting kind of fun to and finally, okay, I better get some materials from killing this or this is the last one of these I do. You're tasked with doing it this way as you can't attack it head on due to it being swarming with sky babies. Once you take down an offspring, you build up DP or Dr. Pepper. Once you have enough Dr. Pepper, the behemoth runs and hides in the ocean. I feel like now would be the best time to attack it, but see my ocean rant from earlier. Outside of attacking and destroying havens and bases, one of the more interesting things it can do is infest havens, turning them into Pandoran zombie versions of themselves, complete with infested aircraft. If buying DLC piecemeal and you're looking for recommendations, I'd say this is probably one of the better ones, if not my current favorite. Keep in mind, I used to hate it. It was frustrating, and every time that damn whale would surface, my anxiety rose with it. But then, after my second playthrough with it, and the third time getting videos for this review, I came to really appreciate it. The DLC livens up the geoscape, which was really needed, but it does a couple of things in your benefit. You now can get a few basically free aircraft tied to the low cost of activating a new Phoenix base, which is really important. But even more important are the infested havens. While they are enemies and you have to watch out for infested aircraft attacks, they keep that haven from being destroyed by regular Pandoran raids. Which means when you finally get around to cleaning one out, it goes back to being a normal haven. Fully staffed by humans somehow and can raise your global human percentages back up. It is, in my opinion, outside of the Phoenix base attacks, that this giant red whale is none other than a red herring. It can be largely ignored until you ultimately deal with it. Disclaimer again, you shouldn't take advice from me, but I've been successful with this approach, and you can too. Just follow these 3 easy steps that you can apply to anything in your life. 1. Ignore the big red thing. 2. 3. Look at all that money you saved! DLC 4, Corrupted Horizons, went back to more tactical combat editions. The idea here is that some mystery jerk was doing experiments and created a monster in the form of an Acheron, a new enemy that can do just about anything it sets its little mind to. It can spit goo, call reinforcements, resurrect fallen comrades, and can hop around more than the barbarian from Diablo 2. With it comes corruption, a new mechanic that saps your will points but boosts your damage when hit by the Acheron or if you do any missions in the mist. These debuffs aren't temporary, they are carried over on your squads from mission to mission until you learn how to heal it. This can be really painful coming into a mission with people that only have like 4 will max. Once you learn how, you can heal this corruption with mutagens, a secondary resource from the base game used for mutations, like the Days Head. Usually you'd have way more mutagens than you'd ever need, but this DLC really makes you need them more than before. On the flip side, the Phoenix Project gets access to a Build-A-Bear class called the Mutoid. They can do near anything your regular guys can do, plus a lot of the things the Pandorans can do as well. Now you can spit goo, resurrect things, or toss worms. You can create them entirely from mutagens, and all their skills use mutagens. Like jack of all trades, they aren't as good as your regular troops, but you can pump them out and fill your ranks on the cheap. Overall, it's a decent addition. The Acherons can be a real threat if left unchecked, and the Mutoids are fun. My only issue is once you take care of the corruption, it's just completely gone and the gameplay's like it never existed. I think at least Acherons could still use their corruption mechanics in some form after the curing. I'd like some longer lasting effects is all. As of this review, DLC 5 Chaos Engines isn't out yet. I am excited for it as vehicle play could sorely use a once over, especially Mutogs. I don't know if we will see upgrades to existing vehicles or brand new ones, but I'm honestly hoping for both. Maybe some kind of customization for everything similar to augmenting your squads. If you want to skip spoilers, jump to this timestamp. I'll give you a few moments to do so. How's things on your end? I hope you got something cool in your gift sock. Okay, that's enough. At the end of the game, you find out that there is a planet in our solar system on the wackiest orbit imaginable. Every some millions, billions of years, it gets pretty close to Earth, and this planet is basically a being known as Yugoth. Yeah, like straight out of H.P. Lovecraft old ones. It controls the population that are infected with the Pandora virus, and it gets stronger as the planet moves closer. The Pandorans have been busy crafting a vacuous body for it to inhabit, and your best bet is to use that conduit to fight back in some way. How you fight back is dependent on what ally you side with. In my last full playthrough on YouTube, I sided with Anu, which was kind of neat. You more or less take their Messiah, the Exalted, and plop her on the conduit with the idea that she is now controlling the Pandorans instead of Yugoth.
But he believes that I'm his servant, and that will be his downfall. I have watched him, listened to his mind. I know his weaknesses.
Another example would be the Sanhedrian option, which is plopping a device on the critter you killed and giving all the Pandorans free will, which seems like the more humane approach. Honestly though, whichever faction you choose, it really amounts to plopping a thing on the thing. I would have liked more variety here, but there really is only so many ways you can use a corpse. The final fight itself is actually pretty cool. Depending on the difficulty, you go through some really tough guards before making your way to the Yugothian entity. A many-eyed, shelled face that attacks by looking at you with the scorn of a disappointed father. You take damage and everyone near you takes damage every turn. You really just gotta social distance and you'll be mostly okay. They recently made this a bit easier as you can now take out an eye and it will remove one of these attacks. It's ultimately a pretty fun fight and it helps to have a few Vita grenades for long distance healing. The other really great spoilery mission would be the one where you take down the behemoth in Festering Skies. Just look at this map, it's so badass. This might be my favorite mission in the entire game. You not only get your squad randomly split up on each side of the beast, but you got to fight your way to the center with each mini squad and place things on things. It's really tense depending on how your squad splits up. It makes you think on your feet on what could have been a normal mission. We need more of this. Alright, that's it for spoilers. Last thing I want to talk about is the design. I'll start off with sounds. Everything here is serviceable. Some things can feel a bit confusing as to what is causing what. Oh! Some sounds will kill your eardrums. Every time I use Frenzy, it is so loud. I think it's triggering on each unit getting buffed instead of just one Frenzy sound, and that's probably the biggest offender. Some sounds are just fantastic. Is he saying what I think he's saying? In the logs, it says these guys are capable of human speech, so I think so. The music is so good, especially in the Geoscape. I think it does a great job at hopelessness, like the hopelessness of the situation. I'd put half the Geoscape tracks in my futuristic depression mix. The mission music is good too. Very good at being background ambience in whatever situation. There was a bug when Corrupted Havens first came out where the music would just stop playing, and I found myself sorely missing it. There is one track that I go back and forth on, the Legacy of the Ancients Didgeridoo-a-thon. It's good at first, but these specific missions tend to drag on, and the longer it takes, the more didgeridoo you get to the point where it completely takes me out of the immersion. I didgeridoo like this track until I didgeridoo-don't. On to the critters. The creatures are designed to be modular, so arms, legs, heads, torso, legs, I wrote legs twice, etc. can all do different things for the same base creature type to make full use of the free aim mechanic. Most creatures you can see at a glance what they have going on, some are a bit trickier to get their differences. Considering that there are so many combinations and each have their own profile, I think they did an amazing job. Then you have the human units. You have non-Haven independents that scrap together their gear straight out of Mad Max, Anu that can be so mixed with mutations that their units profile vary pretty wildly, New Jericho with their blues and yellows. Also, how cool does the Technician look? I love it. Sanhedrin, which in my opinion has the coolest looking vehicle, maybe the coolest looking armor. It's just all so slick and light. Shows off the stealth aspect of them well. Lastly, the augments, bionics, and mutations. Some of these you can tell at a glance, like the elephant legs or the melee empty chest thing, but most of them are hard to tell what's what. They all look really great, don't get me wrong, but I feel some of those specific profiles could stand out a little more. Outside of the pieces, the environments are a mixed bag. I love the look of the Pandoran colonies. Anu, both slums and churches, are another standout. New Jericho Havens look exactly what you'd expect to find. The Sanhedrin Havens feel a little bland and very samey. That could be their aesthetic though. Most scavenge missions are typically on the same stretch of scrapyard off of I-44 in the Midwest. There are Antarctic missions that are pretty green with trees and ruins. I get that the caps are melted, but I always thought it was a bit more deserty at the best of times. Definitely could use some more variants here. Since we don't have underwater missions, I'd love to see some coastal maps. Could add some tactical flavor as well, knowing things could be coming out of there more often. Maybe some desert maps or some really mutated landscape. Maybe we could fight by a section of the Long Pig. One of the requests I see from time to time is that the designs could lean into more of a horror aspect, and that some of the original designs did use more body horror. After looking through the art book, I agree with this sentiment. Looks like we got some of that with the Acheron, and I'm here for it. The sickly look on a lot of these match up with the Terror Sentinels we have now, and I'd hate to go up against more of that. A lot of the things described in the events from points of interest describe horrors that we never really see. We should start seeing these. That will be my one wish. One wish from a little lad. Please, sir, more body horror. Maybe we can get some cool things through modding, though as I understand it, this game is not really set up for modding. You won't have the modding scene of Firaxis XCOM 2, but that game was set up with modding in mind. Firaxis XCOM 1 wasn't made with modding either, but we got long war out of that, which in turn made modding even possible in that game. So basically what I'm saying is I'm tempering my expectations, but keeping an eye on it. As my nephew used to say, passion plus limitation breed innovation, and the Phoenix Point community are indeed passionate. Shout out to the Discord. Almost every time I lurk in there, I see discussions in the mod community. In fact, hopping on Nexus Mods, there's already a healthy amount to choose from. That's the review. Definitely check it out, especially if you're into turn-based strategy games. I give Phoenix Point 58 cinders on my true pizza scale. There's enough meat here to fill even the most gluttonous. I lost the analogy, but it's a good one and it just sucks me in. It strikes a chord in so many ways, and I'm definitely looking forward to DLC 5 when it comes out soon. I'm not sure about the probes thing for these. Sounds kind of gross the more I think about it, but I already went in too deep. That's definitely a work in progress, and I'm sure I'll be ashamed of the name by this time next month. It was probably obvious from the intro that this was supposed to come out by the end of 2021. Oh boy, did I underestimate what it takes to make one of these. I do want to go forward with this format as far as the channel is concerned. I know this may annoy some people who joined the channel for the Let's Play aspect, and I get it, but I gotta look out for me. I was barely able to keep up with the upload schedule of that last playthrough, and I could tell that the work was suffering here and there. So I gotta go with what works for me in a mental health capacity. And this format, I really friggin' enjoyed. So I hope you do too. And that being said, I'm still planning to do DLC 5 when it comes out, but I'm gonna do it in a more like a mini review format. So just a heads up on that. Keep your peepers on the channel. Thanks for watching, everybody. Catch y'all in the next one. Bye-bye.
Oh! Huh.